Who needs enemies when we have our inner critic? The things I say to myself when I make a mistake, I wouldn't dream of saying to anyone else. Today, I'll share how I learned that self compassion was the crucial missing ingredient for the most important relationship in my life, the one with myself. We'll also cover what self compassion is and what it's not, why it's essential to doing the hard things that matter, and two simple self compassion techniques that I turn to in the moment when I need it most. I'll be honest, I didn't always know about the importance of self compassion. It wasn't until I had a personal revelation when my perspective completely shifted. I'm going to take you back about 17 years ago when I was a new manager in a new organization. I was eager to give it my all to prove that I was the right pick for the job, even though I had my own personal doubts. There was a colleague who I admired within minutes of meeting her. She was funny, smart, a natural leader, and just an all around great person. A few months in, we were paired on a project, and I was so excited to work with her. I thought everything was going great until one day we were meeting in just your typical conference room where she confessed that she struggled to work with me because she felt like she was always letting me down. I was stunned. I remember feeling my stomach drop and time seemed to freeze. I apologized immediately and reassured her that it was the complete opposite. If anything, I thought that she could do no wrong. When I asked her what I had done to make her feel that way, she shrugged helplessly and said it wasn't anything I'd said to her, just how she sometimes felt around me. Ouch. From then on, I worked hard to improve my communication skills, show genuine appreciation, and really whatever I thought would help me avoid making someone feel like that again in the future. Building those skills were helpful, but it wasn't until years later, while reading Self Compassion by Kristen Neff, that I had an epiphany. It hit me that it wasn't what I had been saying to her, but what I had said and continued to say to myself that was a real issue. I think that my relentless self criticism and perfectionism made my colleague think that I held her to the same impossible and frankly irrational standards. That realization was a turning point. Learning to be more self compassionate has helped me develop a kinder relationship with myself, build stronger, more meaningful connections with others, and tackle the challenges that are important to me. Before we dive into what self compassion is, let's first talk about what it's not by covering a few myths. Myth number one: self compassion is being weak or lazy. Not at all. Think of a great boss who encourages and supports you. Instead of tearing myself down, I've learned to accept that mistakes are just part of life. That doesn't mean that I stopped aiming high. It means that I can handle setbacks with kindness, which helps me continue to learn and move forward. There's a quote by psychologist Carl Rogers that represents this well. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. Myth number two: self compassion is selfish. No, I learned that when I'm kind to myself, I actually have more emotional energy to be kind to others. Also, think about how people can pick up on our stress or negativity. They can also feel the ripple effects of our self compassion. It's contagious in the best way. It's a gift we give not just to ourselves, but to everyone around us. Myth number three: self compassion means avoiding responsibility. It's actually the opposite. This is one of the biggest misconceptions I had that held me back from embracing self compassion sooner. It isn't about lowering my standards or a free pass to ignore mistakes. Instead, it helps me own up to my mistakes without beating myself up. When I feel safe admitting where I can grow, I see things more clearly to keep improving. Not because my self worth is in question, but because I care for myself and want to be my best. Research has debunked these myths and others, but if we carry long held underlying beliefs like these, it can make practicing self kindness a challenge. Awareness is the first step to breaking through. There's another misconception I want to cover, which is that self compassion is the same as self esteem. Turns out they are very different. Let's break it down by starting with self esteem. If you grew up in the 80s like I did, you might remember the self esteem movement. Back then, the goal was to build kids' confidence by shielding them from criticism. It was initiated in an effort to improve academic performance, and parents and teachers were encouraged to use constant praise and positive affirmations to protect kids from feeling like failures. In California, where I grew up, they even created a self esteem task force. At first, it sounded like a good idea, but research later found that self esteem wasn't as effective as people had hoped. At least, it wasn't in the way it was being taught back then. Eventually, the movement was abandoned. It even became spoofed in a famous Saturday Night Live skit called Daily Affirmations with Stuart Smalley. Have you seen it? Stuart would look in the mirror and say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Fun fact, Stuart Smalley was played by Al Franken, who later went on to become a US Senator. So, what exactly is self esteem? It's how we measure our self worth. But here's the catch, for many of us, feeling good about ourselves depends on being special or above average. This can lead to endless comparisons and competition. Dr. Neff describes self esteem as unstable and only there for us in the good times. When we make a mistake or feel unhappy with ourselves, our self esteem can tank, leaving us in a cycle of self doubt. While having some level of self esteem is important, constantly chasing high self esteem can backfire. It can make us feel like we have to prove ourselves over and over again, often at the expense of others. In fact, studies show that high self esteem is linked to narcissism, less empathy, and even prejudice. I was surprised to learn that some research suggests that violent criminals often have higher self esteem than the general population. Okay, that's pretty extreme, and I'm not trying to make self esteem out to be the bad guy. But unlike self esteem, self compassion doesn't rely on feeling better than others. Self compassion is about recognizing that being human is hard and that everyone deserves kindness, including ourselves. Dr. Neff's research breaks it down into three main elements: mindfulness, common humanity, and kindness. Mindfulness is being aware of our thoughts and feelings without ignoring them, pushing them down, or over identifying with them. Common humanity is realizing that struggles and imperfections are just all part of the human experience. We're not alone in this. Kindness is responding to ourselves with compassion instead of harsh criticism. Practicing self compassion daily has transformed how I face challenges and helped me to do the hard things that really matter. By extending warmth and patience to myself during tough moments, I've replaced self criticism with care and encouragement. This shift helps me grow and bounce back without the emotional roller coaster of self judgment. In the long run, self compassion has been a much more stable and empowering source of self worth for me than self esteem ever had. Wondering if you could use more self compassion? Spoiler alert, I think most of us could. There's a self assessment to help you find out where you stand. Click the link in the description for a free handout with details about the self assessment and simple ways to practice self compassion every day. Self compassion isn't just about feeling good, it's about living better. Research shows that self compassion boosts happiness, optimism, and emotional resilience. It's linked to lower stress, anxiety, and depression, as well as better physical health and sleep. More on that later. Self compassion is especially important for women. Society teaches us to put others' needs before our own. And while we're often compassionate towards others, we're typically less compassionate towards ourselves. The book Mindful Self Compassion for Burnout explains that caregivers and people in service roles often struggle with self esteem because they feel guilty about their own privileges. Jobs in service fields like nursing and teaching are mostly held by women, and caregiving at home often falls on us too. This really hit home for me. Caring for my dad during his final weeks battling cancer was the hardest thing I've ever done. Whenever I struggled with my role as his caregiver, which was really most of the time, I felt selfish and guilty. My stress paired in comparison to his suffering, and I didn't make space to care for myself as a result. Also, my entire career has been in the public and nonprofit sectors, focused on helping those struggling to meet basic needs. When things would get hard at work, I would think, I have so many privileges. How can I complain? No matter your gender, constantly focusing on others' needs leaves little room for self care, making it harder to maintain balance and emotional well being. Over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment or burnout. It's got me rethinking the significance of self compassion, not just for myself, but for my team and workplace. I think it might be essential to employee retention, well being at work, and providing services more effectively. Before I share my go to self compassion exercises, let's first discuss something that Dr. Neff calls the paradox of self compassion. She warns that we don't practice self compassion to make the pain go away. Instead, we practice it because we deserve compassion when we are in pain. While self compassion does help to ease suffering, trying to use it to get rid of pain can actually make things worse. Pain often grows when we fight it. When we accept our pain with compassion, healing is more likely to follow. Here's an analogy that helped me to better understand this concept. If you ever had trouble sleeping like I have, you know that forcing yourself to sleep only makes things worse. The more you fight sleeplessness, the more stress you create, and then sleep feels impossible. But when you accept that you're awake and show yourself kindness, acknowledging that it's tough, that you're tired, it's easier to relax. And when you're calm and comforted, sleep often follows naturally. Speaking of sleep, I've struggled with it most of my life. I used to dread going to sleep because during certain times of the month, odds were high that I was going to wake up in the middle of the night, stay awake, and feel terrible the next day. Now, I give myself compassion and let go of the resistance I feel when I'm having trouble sleeping. And nearly every time I fall back asleep. I still wake up some nights because, well, hormones, but I've stopped dreading it. I can't emphasize enough how huge this change is for me. It's a complete turnaround from the nights when I used to lie awake, frustrated, and restless on a regular basis. Self compassion has been a game changer for me in so many ways, including drastically improving my sleep health. So, what does practicing self compassion look like? You can find some really wonderful resources, such as guided meditations and exercises at self-compassion.org. I've included the link in the free download. Here's a simple exercise that I use to start my self compassion journey that might help you. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I take a moment to pause and take these 3 steps. Acknowledge what I'm going through, remind myself that struggles are part of being human, and show myself kindness. When I acknowledge my struggle, I will say, "This is hard," or "This hurts." To remind myself that suffering is part of common humanity, I will say, "We all struggle in our lives. I'm not alone." I then ask myself, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? The two that I turn to the most are, may I learn to forgive myself, and may I learn to accept myself as I am. When I pull that all together, it can sound something like this. Making mistakes feels really hard. We all make mistakes we regret. I'm not alone. May I learn to forgive myself. I usually close my eyes and take deep breaths while I relax into the comfort that I'm creating. Sometimes I need to repeat these phrases several times until I notice that shift from self blame to self compassion. Another exercise I turn to is to directly address that inner critic I mentioned in the beginning of this video. For this exercise, I think about how I use self criticism as a motivator. When I catch myself being self judgmental, I pause. I notice the emotional pain this self judgment causes. I acknowledge the pain and replace it with a more supportive inner dialogue. Sometimes I think about how a kind and supportive person, like a friend, would encourage me. What would they say to gently point out that my behavior isn't helping, while also motivating me to make a positive change? I imagine the most encouraging message they might offer, one that supports my desire to be happy and healthy. Finally, I remind myself that love and encouragement are far better motivators than fear and judgment. It might sound obvious, but if you've been practicing self criticism for as long as I have, it will take time to override that habit. A common self criticism I inflict on myself is that I feel like I make mistakes out of carelessness, and if I had just tried harder, I could have avoided it. That's a glimpse into my perfectionism at work. With that example in mind, the exercise can sound something like this. I know that it's easy to feel like mistakes happen because you didn't try hard enough, but I don't think that's true. You care and you're doing your best. Mistakes don't mean that you're careless, they mean that you're human. It's okay to wish that things had gone differently, but beating yourself up doesn't help you grow. It just drains your energy. What if you looked at this as a chance to learn? Ask yourself, what can I do differently next time? You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You're trying, and that's enough. What would you say if I told you that ChatGPT wrote out the response to that last exercise? Okay, whatever feelings you have about I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised by what it produced. Honestly, it was more detailed than the one I had been using for myself, and not sure how to take that. So, why would I turn to a computer for emotional support? Well, I know from experience it can be awkward and alien at first to think self compassionate thoughts. I was curious to see if AI could help, and I think it can. If you're interested, you can find the AI prompts for these exercises and a bonus one I didn't cover in the free download. Feel free to tweak the prompts to better meet your needs. Also, if these exercises didn't resonate with you, don't worry. Self compassion needs vary from person to person. Check out the free download for resources with more options. While self compassion isn't a quick fix, it's helped me to strengthen the most important relationship in my life, the one with myself. Without my self compassion to support me, my inner critic would have prevented me from taking on a challenge like starting this YouTube channel. There's something else that prevents me from taking on challenges that matter most: my fear of failure. In the next episode of this How to Do Hard Things series, we'll explore how fear of failure is one of the biggest reasons why we aren't able to achieve the things that matter and how we can overcome it. Subscribe so you don't miss it or other videos in this series. If you're watching this after I posted it, then it will magically appear here. Let's grow together. See you in the next episode.